All right, everyone, just want to give a heads up. We're kicking off the live stream here, public live stream for infrastructure on YouTube.
All right, thank you, Trevor. Welcome to Infrastructure's group conversation. I posted the slides in the document, and I'm watching the document for questions. So please, I'm ready to take your questions. All right. Since there are no questions yet, I'll state the obvious, in which June and August have not been particularly good months for GitLab.com. And as noted in the slides, I think we run into some application bottlenecks, and we were also a little bit blind to them. So there's been a number of steps that we're taking to address that. Andrew has been doing an incredible amount of work to uncover those bottlenecks and work with those bottlenecks, and so has the team in addressing them. And then we've been devoting a lot of cycles to increasing our observability on GitLab.com, as well as our ability to respond to these things. And that also includes development, who has been with us in the trenches in addressing a lot of the issues. And we've systematized a way in which we can engage development to respond to these things significantly faster than we've been able to in the past. So from where we start in infrastructure, big shout out to development, because they've been super helpful, and we're very, very grateful for all the work they've done and the new collaboration that we've kicked off through the rapid action process, and then the weekly performance and availability review that we're doing. So super grateful. Still no questions. I know I do great presentations, but there's gotta be questions out there. All right, so as I wait for your questions, obviously you have heard or probably seen in the handbook that there's a new team in infrastructure that we're putting together. It is called the scalability team, and it is intended to essentially work on scalability, as the name implies, to make GitLab.com able to function at the scale that we have and that we expect to grow to. We wanted to have a team that is very close to the SRE team, with enough development chops to be able to not just deal with things that come up, but also start thinking and building the product to avoid the type of incidents that we've been experiencing recently. This team is not sort of tiered to support for SRE. This team is actually a group of developers that are working on making GitLab scalable, and they will participate in. I think you're not sharing your screen. No, I wasn't sharing my screen, since you can all see the slides, and we're not specifically going through the slides. But if there are specific questions about the slides, by all means, ask them. So, I see a question. So I'll wrap up real quick on this team. So this team is not tier 2 support for infrastructure, but it is a group of developers that are going to make GitLab more scalable than it already is. And the initial thought right now is that the team will participate in the development on-call rotation at large, not have their own on-call rotation. So I'm going to take to Dan. Would you like to verbalize your question?
Sure thing. I wanted to ask you, in slide 3, I would be interested if you could just walk through what those steps are in our future planning in terms of our capacity.
So a lot of that has to do with, a lot of that has to do with our observability capabilities, and also in trying to understand what the capacity of the infrastructure is. Andrew has been devoting a ton of work to that. There is actually now a capacity and saturation dashboard that he created, which tries to make a good estimate of how much runway we have. And each component will continue to work towards refining what that capacity means. the dashboard as it stands today is it's a very rough first iteration on that. And then it's, in terms of what this team, what this scalability team is going to be able to do in making the estimation of, how far, when we do a certain thing in the application, how far can we take this? So I don't have specific details or steps right now, other than this combination of observability and estimating, and then what application and infrastructure changes we can make to have a good idea of when the next wall is.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering why there was specific steps in the future planning. As I thought that was interesting.
So that is a contextual. It's kind of think of it as we were trying to explain in a graph. This is actually Eric's graph, and he was trying to explain, at a very high conceptual level what we think could happen. And so, for instance, in the graph, you can see that the GCP migration, just by virtue of running on GCP, bought us a significant amount of runway. Now, these things don't work on a strict stepwise pattern like you see there, but roughly they kind of do, in the sense that you develop a system, you design a system, you put it in production, and then you're going to start seeing where the limits of that system are. And at some point, you just decide that you need to be revolutionary as opposed to evolutionary in terms of adding capacity. So the graph itself is very conceptual and trying to explain how we run into the wall last June. Steven.
Jerry, sorry to interrupt real quick. I should also point out that it's really important for everybody to understand that that graph is not only representative, but it's not even to scale.
Right.
The graph implies that we're close to hitting our threshold where users are going to start slowing down, and if anything, we expect it to grow much more dramatically. So we need to keep that in mind. That actually the back end of that graph growth is still going strong and going to be that way for a long time.
Steven.
Yeah, I saw the bottleneck sentence there, and was just curious about those hidden bottlenecks.
Yeah. So what that means essentially is, for instance, the first significant bottleneck we hit was Redis itself, right? And so that was actually hiding a lot of inefficiencies in the background jobs that we simply were not able to see until the Redis bottleneck was removed. And so bottlenecks, what we're observing is the typical behavior when you start hitting these scale limits. They start shifting around, and the bottlenecks exist, but some of them are not visible because you have something else sort of holding the rest of the environment back. But once you start addressing those, then those bottlenecks that were hidden from us, for instance, Andrew actually had some ideas that the background jobs were going to start creating problems, but we didn't really have the actual numbers. And once we did the work on Redis, then that became very apparent. Others, for instance, that we saw with PG Bouncer, we only saw PG Bouncer hit a wall once we had a specific failover on Patroni that shifted the load in a way that we didn't expect. We expected the load to rebalance across all PG Bouncers, but that did not happen. And so it turns out we were very, very close to saturation limits on PG Bouncer. So some of these bottlenecks are just not well visible, and we need to work at getting better at getting visibility into them and getting an understanding of where they are and what we think we're next. And again, Andrew has been doing an incredible amount of work in that regard, and almost everything he's predicted has actually turned out to be true. So now I just kind of put my hands around Andrew's head and try to figure out what the next one is, but we're trying to be more systematic about how we approach that.
Awesome. Thanks for the detail there.
Yeah, Ben has some additions. So Ben, do you want to verbalize your comments, or do you want me to?
Sorry, sure. I'm just a little busy today. Basically, yeah, we hit these kind of bottlenecks all the time. we've, it's just a very common thing when you're scaling out a platform is you hit one bottleneck, you fix it, it triggers a bottleneck in another system, yada yada. It's, you said exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and it's also worth pointing out that some of these are not. You don't cross the line and then the bottleneck is there, right? You sort of start approaching, and it's this wave of going back and forth, and there may be, you may reach a limit where you see some slowdown in the platform, and then it suddenly goes away, and it takes a while to understand that. And so we've seen that some systems are very resilient in terms of taking a beating, and then they're brittle, and that when they break, they break. Redis is a good example of this. Postgres has a saturation that is much more smooth in that regard. You'll start seeing slowdowns before it actually just completely gives up. But Redis, for instance, tends to be pretty drastic. So a lot of the work we need to do is in identifying these patterns before they actually become a problem. And that's where a lot of the work that Andrew is doing is centered around, and trying not to, seeing these patterns before they actually become a problem. Okay, so while someone else asked another question, the other very significant changes that we're making in infrastructure is that I'm stepping down as director. I think I've taken the group as far as I can take it, and I think it's time for someone with far more seniority than me and more skills to take us to the next level. So Eric decided that we need a senior director of infrastructure. So until we find that individual, and we're actively looking for this person, I will continue to serve as director, and then I'm transitioning to an individual contributor role as an engineering fellow. Both of those developments are very exciting for me specifically, especially because I don't want to undo the work that the team has done over the last 18 months by wading into the limits of my own abilities as a manager. So I think someone with more experience, it's time for that person to come in and take us to where we need to go next. Okay. So one final thing that I will mention that I think is, I know Ben is excited about this, is that we've decided that we're going to move GitLab.com to Kubernetes before the end of the year, essentially. And some of that work has already started. The registry is now completely being served from infrastructure that is Kubernetes based. And now we've learned, or we now have a lot of the basics built to be able to support this. And we will start finding components and services in the infrastructure that can be migrated until we essentially get the entire thing on Kubernetes. So that is also a very exciting development. It's a non-trivial project to tackle, but I know the team has actually been kicking and screaming for the last year that we needed to do this, and I think we're finally ready to take that step. So that should actually unlock a number of things for us. Specifically, we're starting to run into some limits with the things that we can do with Chef, aside from Chef licensing changes. So moving to Kubernetes will actually deal and address some of the technical debt that we've acquired over time. So that is also a very exciting development. Yes, Daniel, it does. Surprise. Who knew? In all fairness, it's taken us where we are today. So I am always of the belief that you adopt tools and you adopt the good, the bad, the depth, and all that, and they take you so far, and then you just sort of, once you've reached the limits, you move to the next one, and you're very grateful for the service they've provided. So yeah, but yes, Chef does have limitations. I'm sure we'll find some Kubernetes limitations as well. So anyway, if there are no additional questions, thank you very much for coming to the group conversation. If you do think of things later on, just feel free to reach out, schedule some coffee, and happy to chat. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.